Chapter 13. The Truth About It All.
"See," laughed Terry, "I'm not Captain Ankles at all. These fins and spikes and claws and things, they're not real. They're just costumes." "But why did you behave so bad and pretend to be goblins?"
asked Polly in confusion.
"I'm ashamed to say it's because we were horrible, naughty children," said Caroline, stepping forward with a red face. "We didn't like going to school one little bit.
And one afternoon the teachers made us be in a pathetic school play called 300 Goblins Standing Around Doing Nothing," said Alex, who used to be the goblin known as Big Steve.
"Only we didn't want to,"
continued a tall girl called Vicky, previously Soup Dog. "So we ran away to the Goblin Mountain still in our costumes," said Eric, Yak Triangle.
"And we ran amok, lived like savages, and we acted so wild that eventually we forgot we ever had been children at all,"
confessed Brian, Whippy.
"And one day Mr. Gum and Billy Williams spied us," said Veronica, Oink Balloon, "and they thought we really were goblins, and by then we had forgotten all our lessons, or even how to speak properly, so we just joined their army for a spiteful laugh. But now the Fruit Chew of Babylon has made us understand how important school is," said Terry. "Otherwise we might end up like Mr. Gum or Billy William, who never did learn better. But please don't make us go back to our old school. It was just no good."
"Children," said Alan Taylor, who had been listening carefully, "which school were you at?"
"Dr. No Fun's School of Boredom, of course," replied Alex.
"Yes, I've heard about Dr. No Fun's," sighed Alan Taylor. "They're very old-fashioned there, but at St. Pterodactyl School for the Poor, we believe in teaching children about the natural world and letting them do paintings about how they're really feeling inside."
"Oh, we'd like to go there ever so much," chorused the children.
"I'm sorry," said Alan Taylor sadly. "There are no available places." The children's face fell. "Only joking," cried the gingerbread prankster, his electric muscles whirring merrily. "Come with me. You will be my first ever pupils." And away he jigged up the hill, the children skipping happily after him. "Look, children," Polly heard him say as they disappeared from view. "That tall brown thing is known as a tree." After that, everyone congratulated everyone else, and all the townsfolk were full of joy and merriment. Well, nearly all of them.
"You were going to put me into that machine, weren't you?"
said Jonathan Ripples, tapping Martin Laundrette on the shoulder with a chubby finger.
"Yeah, I was,"
admitted Martin Laundrette, trying to look ashamed.
"But, now the Fruit Chew of Babylon has taught me the error of my ways."
"Forget it, Skinny," said Jonathan Ripples sternly. "You are so getting sat on."
"Everything's back to normal,"
smiled Polly, looking on as Martin Laundrette was squashed into oblivion.
"But hold on, what about Mr. Gum and Billy?"
"Don't you worry about them," said Friday, tapping his nose. "I left them at Boaster's Hill. They promised to wait for me to come back with something to tie them up. And look," he said proudly, "I've just bought a nice strong rope. Why, Polly, whatever's wrong?"
"Them two scruffers done tricked you,"
said Polly, shaking her head sadly.
"I bet you anything they've run off by now."
"Nonsense," said Friday confidently. "They'll still be there. After all, Mr. Gum and Billy William are very trustworthy men. They—" "Oh," he said, realizing he'd been fooled by master criminals. "Oops."
"Never mind, Friday," said Polly. "The important thing is Lemonic Bibber's okay, and it's time for a big pig blowout feast."
So off they skipped to the town square to find the feast already underway. And what a turnout! Nearly everyone was there. Old Granny, the little girl called Peter, Marvellous Marvin, the retired wrestler, Beanie McLeany, who loved things that rhymed, was having a chat about a cat with a bloke in a hat. And Jake the dog was helping Mrs. Lovely to make sweets by licking up the bits that fell on the floor. And when Mrs. Lovely's back was turned, he was helping by making the bits fall on the floor on purpose.
"But where's the Spirit of the Rainbow?" said Polly, looking around. "He should be here enjoying the fun and showing everyone what a winner he is."
"That honest lad cares not for rewards and fame, little miss," nodded Friday wisely. "And that is why he is the Spirit of the Rainbow, instead of a snooker player or something." Oh well, I'll tell you who did turn up, though. That rabbit from the mountainside. It hopped into Polly's skirt pocket, and there it sat for the rest of the day, drinking a carton of apple juice. Oh, and Alan Taylor came back down the hill with his new pupils,
and they'd already done loads of amazing paintings showing how they really felt inside, and everyone clapped.
"Good work, children,"
said Alan Taylor, and he rewarded them all with tiny gold stars and 10 bonus Alan points each. And from Polly's skirt pocket, the rabbit watched the whole happy affair. "All's well that ends well," its bright green eyes seemed to say. This is nice apple juice." And the laughter and the capering continued on, and none laughed louder or capered harder than Polly and her good friend Friday O'Leary. For though their legs were tired from their long journey, their hearts were bursting like joyful apricots to be back where they belonged.
"Look, Frides!"
exclaimed Polly at length.
"The snows are melting, and the sun's coming out, proud as you please, and soon all the ice cream vans will come out of hibernation."
"I do believe you're right," said Friday. "What an adventure it's been. Tell you what," he nodded, getting out his blue guitar, "this calls for a song."
"You better hurry it up then," said Polly. "I got the feeling we're nearly out of time."
"Time, little miss," laughed Friday. "Why, we've got all the time in the end." Hello again. You know Polly and Friday aren't the only ones who have adventures in Lamonic Bibber. Old Granny, the oldest woman in town, has been known to get up to some pretty wild stuff too. And while all the goblin malarkey was going on, OG was having quite an adventure of her own. Old Granny's Cardigan Adventure. One cold winter's day, Old Granny awoke in her big brass bed from before the war, had a little sip of sherry from the bottle she always kept by the bedside, and got up. She brushed her false teeth with her false toothbrush, and had a little sip of sherry from the bottle she kept in her bathroom cabinet from before the war. Then she went downstairs, had some cornflakes, and turned on her old TV from before the war. Actually, a lot of things in Old Granny's house were from before the war. I think I'll stop mentioning that now. Then Old Granny had a sip of sherry from the bottle she always kept down the back of the armchair. Then she had a sip of sherry from a little bottle she always kept hidden in the first bottle. Then she phoned her brother, Old Danny, on a huge old-fashioned black telephone.
"Hello, Old Danny,"
said Old Granny.
"How are you?"
"Old," said Old Danny.
"Me too,"
said Old Granny.
"Great, isn't it?"
"Yes, I'm always having adventures," replied Old Danny. "For instance, this morning I found a penny on the kitchen floor, and last week I found a penny on the kitchen floor."
"Perhaps it was the same penny,"
said Old Granny. "Perhaps," laughed Old Danny. "What an exciting mystery it all is."
"I haven't had an adventure for ages,"
said Old Granny wistfully.
"The last proper adventure I had was in 1978, when I joined that punk rock band. Do you remember?"
"Oh, yes," said Old Danny.
"Rancid Vomit. What a great band that was. I've got all your records, especially since I'm your brother."
"Yes," sighed Old Granny.
"Well, I'd better go now, Old Danny, because you live in Australia, don't you, and you're asleep in bed."
"That's right," said Old Danny.
"Call me if you have any adventures. Bye."
Well, Old Granny sat there for some time, having a bit of a daydream. After a while she decided to go out and buy some milk, a bag of those special horrible sweets that only old people are allowed to buy, and some more sherry. And that's when the adventure began.
"I can't find my cardigan," she said in amazement. "Where can it be?"
My goodness, what an adventure. Old Granny must have looked for that cardigan for nearly 3 minutes, but finally she found it. It was lying on the kitchen floor.
"Just wait till Old Danny hears about this,"
chuckled Old Granny, picking up the phone once more.
"He'll have to call me Old Cardigranny."
And he did. The end.